things missing, and it's like it says that this is required, but I can't find it in here. And I've actually had a grant denied because I emailed them a piece that it said was required, and I didn't upload it into grants.gov because they forgot to put it in the package. And they said that I should have contacted them earlier.
Emily, I am so sorry to interrupt. And there was a snafu and it didn't start recording. So is it possible for you to go back to the beginning? I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Hopefully everyone can see and hear you guys hear you now, which I think they can in the chat. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Tell me when you're ready.
You are ready to go. So go ahead and introduce yourself and start sharing all your knowledge.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Emily Luscombe, and I'm the Natural Resources Director at the Intertribal Agriculture Council. And I'm doing a presentation on writing grants and agreement proposals, the really basics. And we're going to start with the grants.gov and common issues that are in there, because this is a problem that many people have. And so there's a little bit of a tips and tricks here. So one of the things that you need to make sure is that you register early and that you make sure that the tribe has a current SAMS account early. So this is something that you'll need to check with probably your fiscal department, your tribal administrator, your chair, find out who their SAMS account registration person is, and make sure that it's active and that it's current, that it has the correct contact details. Because if you've changed tribal chair or any of the fiscal contacts or anyone on the SAMS account, or someone has forgotten to do the quarterly renewal, you might go in and try and submit a grant in grants.gov only to find out that you can't because the SAMS number is not current and active. So it's really important to make sure on a regular basis that you know that that's updated and active. Don't wait until you're ready to submit a grant to create an account in grants.gov, because it takes an authentication process that has to go through to the authorized representative, which is usually the tribal chairperson. And then it goes through this process with grants.gov, and it can take time. We did have one time where there were so many snafus with it that it actually took 4 months to create an account for someone. So just make sure that you're ready to go and have that in place before you actually intend to apply for a grant. And also, some tribes only have one person who registers and everyone uses the password. It's different from tribe to tribe. So also know what the procedure is within your office and within your tribe. I find it's usually good to have more than one person who's the AOR, which is like an authorized representative in grants.gov, because if one person gets locked out, someone else can go in there and unlock them. Don't wait until the last minute to submit, because grants.gov is known for crashing frequently, and especially when big popular grants are due and everyone's on there at the same time, it has a tendency to crash. And please share opportunity package IDs with others. So especially for really common grants like PPGs, 319s, GAP, any of those kind of grants, when you find an opportunity package ID, share it with other people, because it's really, really hard to find that if you're not familiar with the system. And even if you are, it can be difficult. So it's helpful for everybody to not be going through the same issues with finding it, and save it for the following year, because they don't usually change the opportunity package IDs. So I keep a notebook with all of them for the most common grants that I would apply for. Remember that you need to change your password quarterly. So even if you're not submitting it, you can get locked out. So they're supposed to just tell you that you were late and let you reset the password. It doesn't always happen, and then it can take many days to get it fixed if it locks you out. So I just always make sure to be proactive on that, and make sure that you're familiar with all the required forms. So the SF424, SF424A, B, whether you're having a construction program, a non-construction program, your key contact forms, lobbying forms, non-disclosure forms, all those kind of forms, you should be familiar with those in advance. I always keep copies of some that have been filled out in the past, so I have information for the future. But also, you don't want to get to the end and then realize that you're unsure of what something means on a form, how to fill it out, or who to get the information from. Familiarize yourself with the package well before you are doing the submission. So don't just get an email that has an RFP and start writing the grant without getting into grants.gov and creating the package. I've had an issue before where there was a form that was not included in the package, even though the RFP said that it was required. And so I didn't submit the form with the grants.gov package. I emailed it to them, and they rejected my grant application because it hadn't been submitted through grants.gov, and they said that I should have notified them earlier that it was missing on my package. So it's just really good to get in there, fully read the RFP, check out the package, see all the forms, make sure everything that you need is there before you get into that. And this one is really important. Most people use Google Chrome. You cannot use Google Chrome with grants.gov. You can do some basic searches and things on it, and it will seem like it's working, but it's not really. So I've had the best luck with Firefox. Some of the Microsoft browsers are also okay, but generally Firefox does not crash as much or have as many glitches with the grants.gov. But Google Chrome glitches completely with grants.gov. Make sure that you keep copies of the evidence of submission, because sometimes there's an issue on the agency retrieval side. And if you don't have evidence that you submitted it, then they'll say, well, you missed the deadline. However, if you have evidence, then sometimes they will give you a second chance to submit. And so this is just a screenshot here, just so you can kind of see what the basic grants.gov page looks like when you come in, if you're not familiar with it. So there's a place where you can search grants, but you can also search them up here at the top. And then this is where you would log in, or where you would register for an account up here. There's a lot of other things that you don't necessarily use on here. Sometimes I do come on here for their form registry, though, because there's other grants that often will require an SF424, like all the common forms, but are not submitted through grants.gov. And sometimes it's hard to tell if you have the most up-to-date version of those forms, but the ones that are in here in grants.gov are usually the most up-to-date. And then this is what it looks like when you come into search grants.
Emily,
oh,
I'm just going to interrupt you. Are you forwarding the slides? Because the slides are not moving for us.
Yes, I am.
Okay. So let's see if we can maybe stop sharing and share once again. I think that might work. Sorry about that, everyone. Just hang on. Today was going so good without any technical difficulties.
Okay, hang on. Oh, now I'm trying to get it to let me out of the full screen so that I can reshare.
And everyone, I'm sure that if Emily hasn't already uploaded it to the sessions page, she will upload the PowerPoint to it, so you can look at it after our session is over.
I uploaded it as a PDF, and if anyone can't find it, they can contact me and I'll email it to them.
Great, thank you. And that's under.
Did you put my email in the chat?
Yes, I will do so. Yeah, you can find that in the details tab.
Okay. So let me go back a slide now, since I was advancing. Where did you guys lose the advancement of the slides?
You know, it was only on the first page. You had gone through a couple, but I think this is a good spot to start it on and then just go forward. Okay? And I'll put your email in the chat.
Okay. Well, I'll start on the one before, since you said you didn't see that. So let's skip up to here. So this is when you go into search grants, this is what it looks like. You can search by keywords, by opportunity number, or by CFDA number. Generally, you will get a more refined search by the CFDA number, but the searching on grants.gov is very clunky, and it is not it is very user friendly at all. So you could put in, you know, a keyword that you want, you know, a water quality grant, and it will bring up everything for health in the entire nation. And even when you put in the CFDA number, sometimes it brings up a ton of things that are not. You can come over and click whether or not it's forecasted, posted, closed, archived. So you can choose which kind you want to come up on that. And then there's a spot here where you can choose all funding instruments, or, you know, cooperative agreement, grants, others. And then eligibility, you can go down and make sure that you're choosing only tribal entities. But then you can also choose like topic, you know, environment, natural resources. I have found that those are totally inaccurate, and so it actually usually makes it worse to choose one of those. And then once you choose one, then this is kind of where you're going to log into. This is your login page. So I just kind of wanted you to see this. We're going to come back to this in a little while. But this is an area where you can get information if you're not sure on things like how you can apply for the grants. It will give you some little things. There's stuff that will teach you a little bit more about workspaces. There's training for applicants. So there's a bunch of resources in here, but the thing that you'll use the most is either apply now if you're going to like have a grant and you're going to put the number right in there, but usually manage workspaces. So you usually create a workspace from another section, but every time you go back into it, you're going to go to manage workspaces. So if you searched and you found a grant and it came up, and this is just a random grant that I picked, I'm not even sure if this one's eligible, a tribally eligible grant. It's just that I was looking for something that would let me bring up all the different information on it that you would be able to go back and look at right now if you want to and see all the pieces of it. So this is a fish passage one. So when you search a grant and you click on it, this is what comes up. It gives you the synopsis. And then when you go to the version history, you do want to make sure you have a quick look at that to make sure that there's been no updates that you're missing somewhere.
Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt again. You're still on slide 5.
Why is it not advancing?
I don't know, but can you, if you email me the PDF or the PowerPoint, I can do it for you if you would like.
Okay, yes. Let me...
Okay, I just put my email in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it stop the sharing?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and continue to talk, and as soon as I get the email, I will share the screen.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you on email right now.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us. While Emily is sending that over to me, I would just like to reiterate all of the things that she was saying. It is so important to navigate and upload these documents well in advance of any deadlines, because we have so many issues on our side. So this is one time that you do not want to leave it to the last minute.
Never procrastinate grants.gov. It's just not a good thing.
As a confirmed procrastinator, this is true.
Yes. So I did send it through to you there as well. Okay. And when I uploaded as well, I had to upload it as a PDF because of the size. But if anyone else wants me to email them actual slideshow, they can manipulate things or whatever, then that's fine as well. Just let me know. So I think I kind of have to wait for you to bring it up, though, because I was going to try to explain it where people can see what I'm talking about. Sucks, though, because I don't have a cursor to show people things on there now.
Oh, well, I don't think we were seeing the cursor anyways.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it's that has to do with how it gets shared on this platform. I'm still just waiting for it to pop up.
Yeah, so when you get in there, you want to check, there's a related documents tab, and you want to look at the related documents tab, because that tab is going to have the most up-to-date version of it, whether they call it a NOFO or an RFP, or, there's a million different names for like grant opportunity, right? Just, they're all the same thing. I don't know why there's different nomenclature. Every agency calls it something different. But you want to bring up that related documents tab, and it's going to have all of the most current stuff. So look at the most recent date on there, and that should be the one that you're working from when you're creating your grant proposal, because a lot of times they make clarifications or relatively major changes. And so if you're working from an original version that went out and they realized there was errors with it, then you could have your grant rejected based on, a clerical error, basically. So you don't want to do that. And then there's a section there that says opportunity package. And so that is really important. That's where you're going to click. And then when you get over there, there's going to be a spot that says opportunity package ID that is listed there. And you want to write that number down, and you want to have that somewhere handy, because if you don't have that somewhere handy, then you're going to have some issues. So then when you bring up go back one.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. When you bring up package, so this is where you click on package, right? And then when you go down, it has the CFDA number. So you should write that down. And then you should also write down your opportunity package ID, and make sure you also write down your closing date, because those are really important, and you should keep those like handy. I like to put them on a sticky note next to the computer so that I don't lose them in computer land. And so then you can see there where it says preview and apply. If you're not sure if this opportunity is for you, you don't really need to preview there, because you can preview in the related documents. It will have the entire NOFO or RFP or whatever in the related documents for you to read, which will tell you what the requirements are, if you're eligible, all that information will be in there. So I only ever use apply on the actions here. And so when you click on apply, now you can go to the next one. It will bring up with the funding opportunity number and the opportunity package ID there for you. And then it'll have application filing name. The application filing name is just whatever internal name you want to be able to recognize for sure what this grant is when you go back into your workspaces and manage workspaces in the future, because it'll bring up all your workspaces sometimes. So I usually just make it, whatever the project name is going to be, whatever I intend my project title to be, I put that in there so that it's for easy reference. In the case of this one, I did make one you'll probably see pop up on the other screen where I just said that it was like a test for the presentation, just so that I would know that that wasn't a serious grant application when I go back in. All right, so let's look at the next screen. Once you put that in, you'll hit create workspace. And so then when you get to this screen, you'll see that it looks, and this is where you have all of the forms that are available to you in the workspace. And it will say optional next to a lot of them. So you see here that it only has 2 that are saying that they are, what is it? I can't read it on here because it's showing up really slow. I can't remember the word that it says, mandatory. So it only has 2 that say that they're mandatory. Don't ever listen to grants.gov mandatory versus optional, because it's not actually mandatory versus optional. The mandatory versus optional is what you need to take from the RFP or the NOFO or whatever they want to call it. It will tell you what forms are required, what is required in your narrative and your budget. You want to take it from there. Why it does it this way, it doesn't go in. So what you have to do is go and click in a box next to each of these. So like where it says attachments, you click there. Next to budget information, you click there, so that it will put this form into your workspace. And you want to make sure that you know whether you're doing a construction or a non-construction program, because that's the only one where there's usually one that you don't choose, but you have to choose one or the other for the budget narrative, because it'll have a budget information form and you need to know whether it's construction or non-construction. And then when you come over to the other side, you will see like lock, download, upload, reuse, or web form. And I am going to suggest that you never use the web form, because if you're in the web form, the whole thing is gone. And you have to start all over again. And the other thing is that when you save it, it's not like a regular size page. So it'll like save, and you'll have like this little piece where like this much of your form is actually off of the page. And so it's really hard to read. It's not as user friendly. And you can't print it out for them to keep a copy in your grant file, because it'll cut off a whole bunch of the page. So I always download the PDF package, and then I save it onto my computer, fill it out, and then I re-upload it. Now, when you hit download, it's going to ask you if you want to lock the form, and you're going to say yes. And then when you go back to upload it, it's going to ask if you want to unlock the form again, and you say yes. They're kind of weird questions. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is part of the process, and it's normal for it to be there. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Oh, also, I wanted to say, make sure that after you upload the form, that it says completed, because there'll be a spot where it says passed, completed. If it doesn't have passed or completed listed in there, your form isn't getting submitted, and you're going to be in trouble. So just make sure that before you submit, that all of your forms tell you that they're passed. When you get this screen, like if you download the PDF and then you go to open your PDF and you get this thing saying the document you are trying to load requires Adobe 8 reader or higher, blah, blah, blah. It does not mean that there's a problem with your Adobe. There's nothing wrong with your Adobe. It means you're using the wrong browser. You've probably accidentally got onto Chrome. Get out of Chrome, use Firefox, and it will work just fine. I don't know why it gives this message when it's the wrong, but that's what you get. All right, next slide. But I've had people who went out and bought software because they thought it was their computer, and it's not. So when you get into the wrong browser and then you have to log in from another browser, you're going to have to go back in and manage the workspace, right? Because you've already started a workspace. So that's where you're going to come in to here. And then once again, you're going to come along the side under grant applications where it says manage workspaces. And so make sure that you have that opportunity package ID, because that's going to make it much easier to get back in. And then you'll click on manage workspaces. Heidi, next slide, please. And then when you come in, you can see where I put the package ID in, and then you just hit search, and then it will bring it up. Let's go to the next slide. All right, and so then once you hit search, it'll bring up all the package IDs, that meet that. And so if you submitted them in previous years or whatever, they'll come up. And so you'll see the one that you're working on, and then you come over to the side where it says copy or manage, and you can just go to manage. Next slide. All right, and then this is when you actually download the form. This is what the top of the form will look like when you down each workspace form will come up differently, and this is what it'll look like. And so it gives you all the information on the grant itself right at the front. And then next slide. All right, and then this is one of the most important forms that's going to be in pretty much every grant, regardless of agency. This is the SF424, but you should know all of your standard forms. I just really wanted to point this one out because there's a couple of really common mistakes that people make with this. And so basically, make sure that you know what your EIN number or your tax file number is. Get that from your fiscal person. Sometimes it can be a trick to track that down because sometimes it's like guarded by one person and it can take a while to figure out what it is. And so I always make sure that I know what that number is, and I keep a copy of it. And then the other thing is you guys don't want to leave it to the last minute, is know what your current congressional district number is, because they redistrict all the time. And one of the biggest bummers that you could ever come across is spending, hours and hours and hours and counting on this great project and this grant and getting your application rejected because you put the wrong congressional district. So just always keep an eye on what the congressional districts are, and make sure that if you're, updating an old form or whatever, that you always put whatever the current congressional district is. When you're filling out this form, you'll see that there's sections that have kind of a yellowy color with a red around them. Those are the only sections that you actually need to fill out. All the sections that have like a gray background or a white background, you don't need to fill those out. When it's like bright yellow, like number 1 and number 2, it means that you have to pick one of the check marks below. And then there's an executive order that you will see listed at the end of the SF424. There's very few projects that I have ever known environmental departments to fall under that executive order. So usually you can just say that it doesn't apply, but you should familiarize yourself with the executive order so that when you do have a project, you can make sure that you don't give the wrong, reply, because then you've perjured yourself on a federal form, or you've perjured the chair, when they're signing this. So it's just really important to check. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, and so then when you go to the related documents, this is where I was talking about, you want to make sure when you see it that you pick the most recent date with the full announcement. You don't want the things that only have a partial announcement, because a partial announcement is, often doesn't have some of the updated information or other things that you want. So I always go for the most recent full announcement. All right, next one. Okay, and then this is just some stuff that I took from the RFP. I downloaded it from that slide, seen before. I downloaded the most recent one and I brought it up. And before you begin, read the whole announcement thoroughly and make note of all the important details, because sometimes you could get so excited about a project and start it and then find out that there's something really important that you've left off that's a major issue. Like, make sure that you're eligible, because sometimes there may be something in the title that says it's for tribes, but when you look at it, it's actually only for a tribal nonprofit. And then you're actually not eligible because it's not for federally recognized tribes, or you're only eligible if you live in a certain state or a certain congressional district. Or so just make sure that you read the eligibility criteria really closely. Make sure that you know the due date and the due time, because they are strict to the minute. If you are 1 minute late, your application will be rejected. So always keep that in mind and give yourself internal dates before that time so that you don't end up against the wire. See if there's a cost match. Make sure that that cost match is something that's doable by your tribe. Find out if you can use in-kind matching. See what all the other options are related to that so that you have the right information to take to your tribal council. If it's a federal grant, remember that you cannot match federal dollars with federal dollars unless they're 638 contract funds, because those lose their federal characteristics and become tribal funds. That goes for in-kind matching as well. So if you have a staff member that's working on a grant and they volunteer to do a few extra things on this grant, but their staff time is still being paid for under a federal grant, then it does not count for in-kind. When you do in-kind stuff, you actually have to keep like a record of who did what, when, or what supplies were donated, all that kind of thing. And so make sure that if your staff do volunteer actual hours or doing hours from a state grant or a nonprofit grant or something like that, that it's very well notated in the records that you keep that that was not paid for with federal dollars, that they did not do that under a federal grant. Also, be very careful with state grants to make sure that they're not a federal pass-through. Because if you're trying to match something with a state grant, but those funds originated as federal funds, then they're still considered federal funds. It's not like a 638 contract. They don't lose their federal characteristics when they run through a state. So just be really careful, because there are some state funds and that are bond monies from states or other things that come from state taxes that you can use as a match, but you need to make sure that you know the origin of the funds. Be very, very careful about knowing the allowable length, supporting materials needed, font, type size, because there are grants that will tell you the specific font that they want you to use. They will tell you, size, the line spacing, the borders, how they want every, attachment done, what page they want photos on, everything. And if you're not following those exact details, they'll reject your application. So just be really careful to make sure that you read all of this really carefully. Even the things that seem like, oh, that's not part of the project, it's not important. It may not be part of the project, but it can completely get your grant application tossed out. So just be super careful. And I've actually had one grant application that required the strangest font. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a font I had never heard of before. It is not a font that's on Word. And so what actually happened was that I had to pay to download the font to write the grant application. So just make sure that you figure all this stuff out ahead of time by reading the entire announcement before you start, and then making notes of all these little picky things that you have to do. Know what your indirect cost rate is and know what your fringe rate is, and make sure that those are allowable, because some grants have a cap on those. So if you have an indirect cost rate that has a cap of something, then you may either have to supplement the indirect cost out of 638 funds by working with the tribe, or it may end up that you just can't apply for that grant, or it may say that the indirect cost rate is capped at 10%, but that utilities and office supplies and all these other things that maybe are normally in your indirect cost rate are allowable. And so then you would have to list all of those out separately in your budget. So just make sure that you're really aware of all that information before you get to that point. And then staff that are paid out of indirect for an in-kind match, it would have to be indirect that came out of a 638 grant. So you would need to be able to track that their indirect either came out of a state indirect fund, or indirect on a foundation grant, or indirect on a 638 contract, because the indirect comes out of another federal grant, it's still considered federal funds for in-kind match. All right, next slide. Okay, and then this is kind of really nice when they hand you like this outline. Not all of the grants do. So the lines a little bit more to see what they really want on an outline. When they tell you project narrative, project title, description, statement of need, actually structure exactly like that, with those words and with those headlines, because when grant reviewers are reviewing this, they're reviewing thousands of applications in many cases. So they want to be able to go through and just click along, click, 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 click. And so this way they can go and check and make sure that you put everything that's needed in the sections. If they have to look for it, a lot of times you're just going to get scored lower, or they may just say that they didn't find it and move on. So always use that. Use any of the jargon or the wording that they use. So put this in as an outline. And any specific terms that they use in any category, make sure that you use those words back. I know that in academic circles, a lot of times people will think that that's plagiarism, but it is not plagiarism. You need to actually use their words because that's what they look for. And in some organizations, they actually have like an electronic scanner to scan for some of the keywords. So you want to make sure that they're in there. Next slide. All right. And then eligible projects. So this is the same thing as well. When it's saying eligible, make sure that you read this really carefully and that you reuse their wording. It's really, really, really important. A different grant application, by the way, it just had more information on it. The initial one I was using. This is one that's closed at the moment. So always use their terms and their wording to describe your project so that it's extremely clear to the reviewer that you're eligible. Because if they don't think that you're eligible, they're not even going to read the rest of it about your project. Read everything really carefully because some grants say you must choose eligibility under category 1, 2, or 3. And then you can only base your grant on that and all your eligibility has to be in there. On other grants, it's a little bit more, you can score higher by being eligible under more than one category, if that makes sense. So read it really carefully because it might hit 7 or 8 different eligibility criteria. But if you're only allowed to put it under one, then you have to somehow make all of those eligibility for your project more robust under that one. Whereas if you get more points for hitting more of them, then you want to actually find ways to word all of those eligibility criteria into your application. Slide. And then the application format and length, this I was saying again, read specific instructions really closely. You know, it says 25 consecutively numbered pages. It's going to tell you what does count and does not count. See, like it says, required application content will not count towards the page limitation. So you have to read exactly what it is, what the page size is, you know, and it says right here, oversized pages will not be accepted. They're not kidding. They will reject you if your margin is off by 1/4 of an inch. Make sure that you're using all this. And when you finish your application, I always start the application like this, but when you finish your application, before you upload it, go back and like look, make sure that none of the fonts got accidentally changed, that none of the line spacing or margin is changed, because it's really a bummer to have your grant application denied for something that simple. And then when it says this federal forms required. So make sure that you have all of the forms here that are required in your grants.gov application in your workspace. You need to make sure you download all of those, whether grants.gov says that they are optional or not. If they say application content says mandatory, then they're not optional. All right. Next slide. Oops. Now the slide's not changing on my end.
Is it not on the title page, table of contents?
Okay, now it did. It just was very, very slow. Okay. It just took it a second. It just popped in. Okay, so then this title page, table of contents. So on the other one, it had said like the different sections, right? So it had said like project narrative, everything. That's really nice when narrative even more, because this is like a roadmap for how to write your grant. As long as you follow this, it's just you're gonna be good. Just don't deviate from what they ask for you, basically. So when you break it down into each section, read each section's directions really specifically. Once again, if they use any special language in there, make sure you use that language. Make little subheaders that fit each of these subsections. So the technical proposal, make sure you break it into all these little sections. Make sure you have the table of contents listed the way they want the table of contents listed. And then pay attention to little things. So if it says like one paragraph and you're like, oh, that paragraph seems kind of run on, it encompasses everything that they're asking for, don't break it into 2, because some reviewers will reject it because you broke it into 2, even though it's really the same thing. So that's really important. And then I also make sure that I go through and put in all of the most important information right? I make sure that I get all of those keywords in there. And then I see where I am on page count. And then I go back in and try to tell a story because you want to grab the reviewer's heartstrings a little bit. You want them to know why this project is important, who it's going to impact, how it's going to impact those people, what kind of difference it's going to make on lives, what kind of metrics they're going to be able to put out to the public to say, look at this great project that we funded, look at the wonderful things that it does. You're going to want them to want to be a part of this project. So try to put in as much compelling stuff as you can, but make sure that you don't go over the page limit. So I always kind of go back and add that stuff in later. It's the fluff. You don't want to overdo the fluff, but you want it there enough to make them have a real reason that they care about your project more than someone else's. All right, next slide. All right, and so then look for scoring criteria. Not all applications provide this, which sucks. I wish that they did. They should all provide this. But some applications will provide scoring criteria. So you'll see like a little table like this where it just tells you like each section, how many points go to that. So that lets you know, okay, project benefits on this one. Like I need to make sure that if I'm running low on my page count or whatever, that the area where I put most of the fluff is going to be in project benefits because it's getting scored a lot higher than the alignment with the Department of Interior priorities, right? So you got to make sure that you hit each point, but wherever you go back and add that fluff is going to be where you have room based on the scoring criteria when they have that. It's really one of the most important sections. And I wish that they had it. The other thing is sometimes they don't have scoring criteria, but past successful applications that you can get off of the agency websites or from a project officer. Or sometimes you can look up and see what tribes were awarded. Sometimes they're willing to share their applications with you. And then when they do that, it gives you a pseudo scoring criteria, even if they don't give you one. And they're also just helpful to look at successful applications anyway. All right, next slide. And then this is the application review information. So when they break it down, so this is a portion of that. This is one of those sections. This was the project need. It broke it down with all these different questions. So make sure that you answer each of these because it's going to help you score higher. Don't just say, oh, okay, I covered project need. Make sure that you covered project need according to these scoring questions. And it's really nice when they do this, but make your answers very, very explicit and make sure that you answer all the questions and the points. The director's answer should be direct and easy to find, right? So that they're not having to search and say, is that answering that question or is... So, for example, here it says like, does the project builder enhance the tribe's internal capacity to manage and protect its water and water-related resources? And if so, how? So it's in your application that says this, whatever name of the project, builds and enhances the tribal internal capacity to manage and protect its water resources by reducing degradation and non-point source pollution from this, blah, blah. So you're going to use that wording that's in the question to start the answer when you put it into your application. And that will really help you with your scoring. Okay, next. And then this is not all applications are grants. And somehow something happened to one of my slides when somebody was helping transfer it. That's not here. So I apologize for that. Which it might come up later, but not all opportunities. Also like loan forgiveness programs, cooperative agreements, and to a lesser degree now there's some stewardship agreements. One of the more common ones that tribal environmental departments for, or you may, is EQIP, which is more of an agreement with NRCS than it is as a grant. All right, next slide, please. Okay, yep, the two slides got switched. I apologize for that because I was having some difficulties with uploading, so somebody transferred the file type for me. So some funding is in the form of agreements, loan forgiveness, right? So that's it. Now, loan forgiveness are USDA programs, which are usually for much, much bigger projects, like usually $1 to $2 million projects. And a lot of times they're like for major water or wastewater infrastructure projects. You have to apply as a loan. So they are very, very technical. And you may want to actually get some professional assistance if you do one of those, if you are not familiar with them. There's going to be a lot of like banking information and past performance and key staff issues, like all sorts of things. We put in one that was a binder that was about 4 inches thick. And so those are very onerous applications to do. And then they become like a grant because they do a loan forgiveness, but it's hard getting through that. When they offer technical assistance, and some other agencies often do, especially and offer you technical assistance, then take that technical assistance and use the keywords that they provide you. And so like when you look on this one, it says, how do I apply? Instead of going to grants.gov to apply, it tells you to call your local NRCS office so that they can help you through it. And IAC also has technical assistance on this. And then it also has here where you can click on the application form. Okay, next slide. Okay, so many of the agreements are really simple application forms like this, but then there will be other documents and things that they want you to provide as supporting evidence for your application. But the NRCS office and your local IAC technical assistance provider, which you can always email me and I can get you in touch with whoever is for your area, they can help walk you through those applications. The supporting documentation is obviously usually more complex, so you may need to get assistance on like what it really is or where to find it, and you'll probably need assistance within the tribe to collect all of that. The loan forgiveness programs, once again, you'll probably need professional assistance because there's a lot of information to gather for those because they're dealing with larger money amounts and they're starting as a loan. IAC can provide some assistance with these, but a lot of that assistance is going to be within your organization because it's going to want procedures and different finance things are done and audits and all this other information that aren't things that we'll be able to help you get because those are things you'll have to get within the tribe. Stewardship agreements are another form of funding that are becoming more common, but they're still relatively new territory. I know a little bit about them, so I can help people with them a little bit if you're working on them. But they're still difficult to do. Some of them have taken over 20 years to get in place, but they're a good way to go for now. So don't knock the opportunity to do a stewardship agreement. And those are usually done to help manage ancestral territories that is not in tribal trust. All right, next slide. And then I just wanted to give you a save the date. We have our Pacific Regional Conference coming up, well, our virtual summit. And this is open to people not just in our region as well. But this is going to be the 9th and 10th, and it's going to focus on drought, climate change, water rights, and building soil health. And some of the tribal projects that go with that. All right, next slide. And then this is if you would like to sign up for our annual conference, which is going to be in person in Las Vegas, where we're going to cover a lot more information, a lot of stuff on drought and climate change and being original land stewards. This is how you can sign up. And it will also have a virtual component for people who can't be there, but it is limited this year. So I would suggest signing up earlier rather than later on this if you would like to go, but it'll be a good networking opportunity. And if you have gap funds that need to be spent down for travel, this is a chance that you can get this conference replaced because there's a lot of gap eligible topics there. All right, next slide. Or is that the last? Oh yeah. And then IAC memberships. I just wanted to get a little bit of a plug for this because the more member tribes that we have, then the more funding we can get, the more that we can help push forward policy for Indian country because it just gives us more weight. And so I would encourage you to look at becoming members. The board of directors has waived the membership fee, so there is no longer a membership fee for this. You just need a resolution and to follow the information that's on here. And then you can have a voting delegate as well, which really helps with policy work. So it's a pretty simple process. And I know we're running out of time, but thank you guys so much. And I'm willing to stay on a few more minutes if we can. There is no COVID vaccination requirements for the in-person conference. We're encouraging people to have COVID vaccines. We are having people mask. We're providing several of the meals, which is why the price is a little bit higher, but that would be a trade-off with the per diem. But we are providing some of the meals to try and keep people from being out with different groups as much. We're not having the breakout sessions this year. we're having everybody in one room so that people will continue to sit with the same group of people all the time, so that there's not as much mixing and chances of contamination. And we have a larger room where we're spreading everyone out more and limiting the amount of people there, so that we're going to be as safe as we possibly can while also allowing people to network in person again. So, are there any other questions?
Like a 30-second delay in the chat box, so we can give them a little bit of time. And remember that we put Emily's email in the chat also, so you can email her later.
Okay, yeah, and the Las Vegas info. Could you post the Las Vegas info, Heidi?
Is that the annual conference?
Yeah, the annual conference. Yeah.
Yeah, I did post that in the chat. It's right above the membership, but I'll go back.
Okay.
Is it this one? No.
Yep, that one.
That one. Yeah. Yeah.
This is the virtual one. The next one's the Las Vegas one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I posted both of the conferences and the link for the membership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're working really hard to be as COVID safe as possible while recognizing that people like need to see each other and network again. You know, so there's certain things too, like we're not doing a registration desk so that people aren't coming into contact with somebody to register for the hotel and then having to come into close contact again with somebody else to register for the conference. Like when you check into the hotel, you know, we're trying to plan where they're going to give you all your registration materials right there when you check in. And so we're trying to be as safe as possible while allowing people to actually get out and do things again. And the hotel has quite a few, you know, cleaning procedures and COVID precautions and things like that in place themselves. And they've been working with us a lot on that. All right. Any other questions?
I don't see any more coming up, but I would just strongly encourage everyone to, if you haven't done grants.gov before, watch this presentation again with grants.gov open and go. I mean, Emily goes step by step and she makes it so much easier. Like just as someone who's had to navigate it by themselves, you know, without any help before, this presentation is amazing. So please go back to it again and use it as a resource.
All right. Thank you, everyone.